Hello and welcome to day 10 of VEDS. One of my niche interests that I think is fueled very much by the internet is vexillology, or the study and critique of flags. Now, like I said, this is a pretty niche interest, and as such, there are only a couple of motifs that go through the community. Open up the Vexillology subreddit on any given day, and you will probably see someone complaining about the Liberian county flags, someone making a joke about how a lot of old world flags look alike, or what we're talking about today, how a lot of state flags kind of suck. And the reason people think this is because, well, they do. A lot of state flags are pretty bad. But mainly because there are some pretty well-established rules of flag design that are sworn by in the community that most state flags break. And I should say that I agree with these rules most of the time, but today I'm going to try to look past them because I feel like we get so myopic in looking at these 5 rules and using them to critique flags that sometimes I feel like we're kind of stifling what could be innovation within the world of vexillology. I'll link to a TED Talk that goes over some of these rules down in the description, but for today what we need to focus on is Rule 4, that there should be no lettering or seals on the flag. So what I want to do today is take what's considered to be the biggest flaw with state flags, that most of them are one color with a state seal in the middle, and that's it. And I want to look at that a little more closely. Specifically, I want to look at what are the best flags in that category and what are the worst flags in that category. Because usually when you see this discussed, you just get all of these flags lumped together as bad. And I don't think any of these are the best state flags by any means, but I think we can look a little deeper. So without further ado, here are the top 3 best and worst state flags that have seals on them. Number 3 on the worst list is Wyoming, and this kind of hurts because Wyoming gets really close to being a good flag, but what it does is it tries to mesh a more traditional seal flag with a more symbolic flag. It takes the buffalo and it slaps that seal right on top of it. The buffalo is very evocative imagery and the color scheme really works, but then that seal just feels out of place. In large part, it feels like an afterthought, so it neither enhances the imagery that is on the flag, nor does it really serve its function as displaying the state seal. Wyoming, just fix your flag, please. Now, number 3 on the best is one that I kind of went back and forth on, but it is Washington State. Now, what a lot of people say when they talk about the state flags is they think there should be standardized colors for them just to create some unity. But I personally like the flags that deviate from the red, white, and blue motif that you see in most of them, and Washington certainly does that. But also, this isn't exactly as much a state seal as it is just a portrait, and I find that to be a very strange thing, especially since Washington was not a state while George Washington was in office. But I think that it does convey an idea of patriotism and tradition. It obviously is a state named after George Washington, so that makes sense. But more importantly, I can actually tell what's going on. With a lot of these state flags, all the seals are too small. But because this is more minimalistic, then this works. I mean, it doesn't totally work. Seeing a portrait on a state flag is kind of strange, and I feel like you want to abstract your imagery just a little bit more than that. But it is interesting, at least. Now, number 2 on the worst list is Oregon, and it actually has a few things going for it as a flag. One is the simple color scheme that makes it a little easier to read. 2 is a really fun fact that it has something on the back. Usually flags are just repeated, but this has a front and back, which I think is kind of fun. Unfortunately, the whole presentation of this flag is kind of garish, and the state seal, which could work, is shrunk down by these giant letters and a date, which means that everything is kind of scrunched together. On top of that, a lot of the imagery within the seal is very familiar. You see pioneers, you see ships, you see, some form of landscape, and of course you see an eagle at the top. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that the flag, which has so many distinctive elements going for it, ends up just being kind of generic. A lot like the Wyoming flag, I feel like this is kind of a waste of potential, and I feel like if you got rid of the words, you expanded the seal a little bit, and maybe you simplified it and took out 1 or 2 of the elements from the seal, then you would actually have a okay state flag. Number 2 on the best list is actually a tie between New Hampshire and Vermont, and the reason I couldn't pick between these two is because I like them for the same reasons. The seals are just aesthetically pleasing. A lot of state seals are kind of boring, but both of these I think are well designed. New Hampshire has a really cool border around it, and the central image is pretty easy to read from far away, depending on how the flag is being displayed. There is a inner garland within the seal, which I think is a little too much, especially with the outside border, but overall I think it works. And the Vermont seal is bordered really nicely. I like the stag's head on top, and the tree is a good central image to ground everything. There are other elements within the design, but I think they all kind of point to that tree, which means that it doesn't feel like it's as overwhelming as a lot of other state flags do. Now, in both of these situations, I think that you could just modify the seal and you would have a better flag, take out the words, maybe one or two of the elements. However, if we are just taking a seal and putting it on a flag, I think that these work pretty well. Now, the number one on the worst list is Maine. And, you have all these rules of flag design. If I were to add one, it would be don't put people on your flag. For two reasons. One, they're too intricate in design to be able to put on a flag and have that be a good design option. They're always going to be too complicated. But two, you can always represent them with symbolism. And the Maine flag is a great example of this. You have some type of farmer and some type of fisherman or sailor, and there are so many symbols that could represent these two occupations and represent these two sides of the state. Heck, the sailor is leaning on an anchor. Why not just have an anchor and a plow? But beyond that, you have the central seal, which is bordered, and it actually looks kind of like the Vermont one. There is a type of cow, and there is a tree and a gold border. But the problem is that the tree is so fat that it almost completely fills the seal. And at that point you wonder, why not just make the entire seal green and then have a cow? The tree itself does not stand out and just kind of muddles the image. And then there is the star on top, and the star just sticks out as very foreign to the rest of it. I'm sure it has some meaningful symbolism, but aesthetically it just never meshes with the rest of the image. Now, the star as well as the tree are carryovers from the original Maine flag. However, if you're redesigning a flag, some of the elements just won't carry over, some of them won't translate, and I think the star is a really good example of this. Like I said, I'm sure it does actually have symbolism, but it's just symbolism that I can't draw from the flag itself, and thus it looks not great. And the final flag on the best list is one that I kind of think I just put on there because of familiarity. It's the state flag for the state where I went to college in, so I've seen it a lot. However, I also think it just kind of succeeds in being a readable state seal on top of a flag, and that's the Illinois state flag. I think the big reason this works is because it has a white background, and so the seal sticks out because the background just kind of draws your eyes towards it. However, also, off the top of my head, I can just name the elements of the seal. There's a shield, there's a rock, an eagle is standing on the rock, it has a banner in its beak, and it has the sun. I could draw that from memory, probably not with the intricacies of the actual seal on there, but I could do it well enough that you would be able to recognize it. It shows that a seal and a flag don't have mutually exclusive principles, that they can mesh together well. However, I can also see some people having problems with this flag, mainly that there's just way too many words, and while I will defend the seal being on there, I really can't defend the amount of language that's on the flag. And there's my video on the best and the worst of the state seal flags, me dipping my toe into the world of vexillology. What are y'all's favorite state flags, or just flags in general? Do you think that these rules are always good, or do you think sometimes they stifle creativity within the field? Let me know, and as always, I will see you tomorrow.